My name is Leah, and while I usually spend my days helping our awesome team members settle in and grow here at AgXplore, today I'm thrilled to be able to help introduce something a little different, but just as exciting. In this episode of From the Field, we're diving into AgXplore's 5 phases of crop development with Dr. John Murphy and Gunther Kreps. It's all about giving your crops the best shot at success from the very first phase all the way through harvest. We'll also hear from folks in the field like Ed Hawkins and Jay Skillman and learn how products like Upward and Adrenaline are making an impact. Whether you're an agronomist or an HR director like me, there's something here for everyone. So stick around, we've got a great episode coming your way.
Thanks for that introduction, Leah. Today, I'm coming to you from Rossville, Indiana. I'm at the main shop location for Moeller Farms, which is one of our cooperators that works with us, uses a lot of the AgXplore products. As you can see today, we're not planting. It's been a little bit too wet so far this April, but as soon as it gets dried off, we're going to be putting some serious hours on this planter tractor behind us. Like Leah said, today, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the 5 phases of crop production. So I'm going to set the stage and talk to you about what we consider those 5 phases and the things that are important to understand about those 5 phases. And then I'm going to send you out to Florida and then on to back into Indiana with some of our sales reps from around the country. So to start with, is 5 phases of crop production. When I think about these 5 phases, I think about our production efforts and what we do in agriculture and understanding that we've got such a huge investment into this crop. And I love to give presentations around the country from coast to coast, north to south. I love asking this question. When does next year's crop start? Right? And I get a lot of guesses that happen. To me and to AgXplore, we contend that the next year's crop starts when the combine leaves the field, right? Or when that harvester leaves the field. So when you think about it, for those of you that have corn, if you're out there shelling corn and you're sitting there running that combine and you got it on auto steer and you're done looking at YouTube, right? You're sitting there thinking about everything that you need to do this farm next before you stake a seed in the ground. And that's a phase that we call the foundation phase. And that is the combine to planter phase. And that is everything from working ground to residue management to fertilizer recommendations to all that plow down that we put on. So everything that we do from the moment you leave that field with that combine to when you come back in it with a planter tractor like this one. Right? So we call that our foundation phase. From there, we go into the establishment phase. And this is where we're in that transition phase today, especially where I'm at in northern Indiana. We're coming out of that foundation phase, getting ready to stick a seed in the ground and go into this next phase, this establishment phase. The establishment phase is such an important phase. This is where we start working with the actual crop, right? When you think about planting, we want to make sure that every seed germinates evenly, right? I've never met a farmer. For those farmers that are watching out there, I've never met one of you guys that loves to wake up in the morning, grab a cup of coffee, look out your kitchen window, and then see half the field come up one day. And then you have to wait for 3 days later until the other half comes up, right? Especially when you plant it on the same day. What's even worse than that, guys, if you go out and plant and you've got a seed that comes up, a plant that comes up one day, and the one beside it comes up 3 days later, that's even worse. Because this one beside it, what's this one called? Right? I know some of you said, hey, it's a weed. Right? That's the last thing we want to see. If we get this wrong and this one comes up 3 days later, it's going to do nothing more than to compete against nutrients and moisture with that water, the essential water that this crop needs, right, to be able to produce. And it's just going to be a weed. So that part on emergence, we're going to talk to you about some things some technologies that we have of getting that crop up and getting it going, from biostimulants to some of those early season PGRs that we have in the portfolio, and the technologies that we have that are in the industry that help set the stage and help us have a successful start to a great year. So that's the establishment phase. After that, we move into my favorite phase, and it's called the architecture phase. Most of us and most of the industry call it the vegetative stage. I think that's way too generic, right? So when I think about a plant is a structure, and all of its parts have a function. If I asked you guys, what is a leaf? Most of you are going to spit out that it's a solar panel, and you'd be right? It is a solar panel. It's a panel that collects that sunlight, turns it into acetate, which is the plant's natural energy molecule, and that's what helps that factory progress and work. But it's so much more than just a solar panel. So I want you to think about it like a fuel tank. For you farmers that are watching, right? I'm going to ask you a question. Do you just have a 100-gallon diesel fuel tank on your farm? I bet some of you are laughing, right? Because none of you have just a 100-gallon diesel fuel tank on your farm. And the reason you don't is because you need that fuel when it's go time. Right? Think about when it's planting season, right? If this planter tractor had to stop and wait for the local fuel delivery to drop 100 gallons at a time, it'd be sitting and waiting quite a bit if every farmer did that. Think about when it's harvest season and you got combines, tractors with catch carts, you've got semis running. You need fuel when it's go time. Plants are no different. During the architecture stage, you want to build a great big fuel tank to be able to hold and store nutrients and energy, right? So that when it gets into the next phase, which is reproduction, and it has that in there to be able, the nutrients and energy in there to help reproduce itself, right? And produce an output, and produce a yield, produce a seed, right? So start thinking about them as a solar panel. These are also more than just a solar panel and a fuel tank. They're also a canopy. We think about this with soybeans a lot. A lot of guys say, I want to get these soybeans to canopy as quickly as I possibly can. And why is that? Well, we want to do that so we can shade the ground to help maybe with some weed control. You know, when we also canopy, we also can help control that soil temperature, right? Keep the sun from baking that soil and keep it from drying it out. What's the value in being able to keep that soil temperature lower and then also retain some moisture in those upper inches of that soil surface? Like, there's a lot of value to it. There's so much value in creating a great big leaf structure. But guys, when you do that, when you create a leaf structure, going back to the solar panel conversation, if you create a great big solar panel, but you don't have the right equipment inside of it to accept the sunlight, then congratulations, you just made a solar panel, a great big fat wide leaf for nothing. When you think about the nutrients that are essential to be able to collect that sunlight and physically turn it into something, it's copper, iron, manganese, zinc, molybdenum, boron. Those are the micronutrients that are essential to accept sunlight and physically turn it into acetate through that daytime photosynthetic period and the nighttime photorespiration period. So those are micronutrients that are essential for photosynthesis to occur. Now, when you look at some of the products that are in the marketplace, there's a lot of products that have a lot of these micronutrients in them. And a lot of us have been known to call them just a shotgun approach to pick up something that is deficient. As I'll tell you, in most cases, when you see a product like that, they're not built to fix deficiencies. For example, if you have one that's got those six micronutrients in it, and you have a zinc deficiency, you need a zinc product. I promise you that those packages like that aren't enough to fix a deficiency. They are products that are built to support the acceptance of sunlight and physically turn it into acetate, the energy molecule for our plants. That's what those micronutrients are essential for. So step one is to build that great big fat wide leaf, right, to make it a solar panel. And then two is give it the nutrients that it needs to be able to function and be able to physically do something with that sunlight that it collects. There's a lot of important things that happen in a architectural phase. Let's take corn, for example. That's my favorite crop. I'm from Indiana. I love corn. So when you think about corn, I want to talk to you about some things that are happening during the specific V stages. All the way through V5, a plant lives off what's called the seminal root system. You guys know that there are two root systems on a corn plant. There's a seminal root system, that one that comes out of that seedling, the little seed, right? And that's the one that's got the radicle is the main root system that comes out of it, and it's got some supporting cast members. That system is called the seminal root system. All the way through V5, that plant lives off the nutrients and energy held in that seed, plus what it gets out of that seminal root system. At V6, it switches gears away from that seed and that seminal root system and goes to that nodal root system or that primary root system. That's the one that creates the root ball, right? And that's when the growing point comes out of the ground. Something really important happens between V3 and V5. In a corn plant, it's setting the number of kernels around. So it's determining yield early. This is important to understand because if you're living off that little baby root system, right, you're not impacting or capturing much of that soil profile below ground. So you're limited on your access to nutrients. So when you think about the technologies that you can put either in the establishment phase or in an architecture phase to help support the uptake of nutrients, or more importantly, the utilization of nutrients inside of a plant. And once that plant takes it into that plant through a root system or from a foliar application, how does it function? How does it metabolize? There are biostimulants that are absolutely essential to make that happen, from seaweed compounds to protein hydrolysates to amino acids to sugar alcohols that help support that function of nutrients inside of plants to make them more efficient. And that way, you're getting more out of what you physically have inside that plant. That all happens during that early architecture phase, right? Wheat crops go through the same thing. Soybeans have some early season determination. You know, when you think about hitting soybeans early with some of these technologies, you can induce axillary branching. And those axillary branches are the ones that hold on to pods, those fruiting sites. So that's your opportunity to help create that yield early, right? And be able to set the stage so you have more fruiting site opportunity for late season success. So there's a lot of factors that happen in the architecture phase. We're going to get deep and we're going to get granular on that when we go through future episodes from the field, from the field. So look forward to that in the weeks coming. The next phase is what we call the reproduction phase. And this is where we go from potential to reality. So this is where we've built that plant structure. We've made it collect sunlight. We've stored up the fuel. We've created a canopy. And now we want to mobilize those nutrients in a process going source to sink. So plants do this thing when it starts recreating itself, where it's built itself up and stored in the fuel tank, and now it needs to take from that and put it into that seedling, whether it's a head of wheat, a pod of soybeans, a kernel of corn, right, or a bowl of cotton. Right? It wants to shove it into that fruiting site, and that's a process called source to sink. And that's where the reproduction phase is so important to understand what you can do to help influence and support that. So couple things that are important in this phase. One is supporting that source to sink movement, and there are biostimulants and there are other technologies that work to support that function inside of plants to make it more efficient. Secondly, we want to do everything that we can to be able to support that retention of those fruiting sites. Let's take soybeans, for example. You've all seen this. You know what I mean by top crop, where you go out that first week in August and there's that top cluster of soybeans. And we get excited and we think, well, there's the next 5 or 6 bushel. And then from there, Mother Nature, she usually gets hot and she gets dry and it aborts those fruiting sites. And we just lost that 5 or 6 bushel. You did everything right, everything you could to retain those fruiting sites, or to build those fruiting sites, and Mother Nature just stole it from you. Now you need to retain it. There are technologies that are out there. There's some late season PGRs, from kynotin to GABA, which is gamma aminobutyric acid, to choline chloride, which is the vitamin B4 derivative, that work to support the retention of fruiting sites and also support the photosynthesis and the source to sink movement of nutrients. Also, late season energy molecules like the sugars, right? Not just straight table sugars, just glucose. I'm talking about the multiple sugar complexes. They got dextrose, fructose, sucrose, glucose, and on down the line, all the OSes that support photosynthesis. They support the mobilization of nutrients. Those are some extra add-ons that you can use during this phase to help support, build that reproduction opportunity, right? Building those fruiting sites, filling out those pods, or those kernels of corn, or those kernels in a head of wheat. After that, we move to our final phase. And this is the one that usually most of us, we're done farming by now because we're tired. Our spouses want us to go to the lake. We need a break. We've been in the sprayer all season long. We're just done farming. And this is the maturity phase. And I'm telling you guys, this is one that we give up on crops in certain cases a little bit too early. I'm going to use soybeans, for example. In 2019, Dr. Sean Castile from Purdue University published a paper that went somewhere along the lines of being titled, "We Give Up on Crops Too Early." He was focused on soybeans. It talked about late season opportunities we have to actually continue to drive that yield in a soybean plant. When you think about soybeans, the size of soybeans matters to yield and test weight. In order to influence the size of soybeans, you've really got to have that late season potassium. Well, knowing that most of potassium comes from the soil, and knowing that Mother Nature usually turns hot and dry, I know that I can't get that potassium that's essential to fill those pods out and create those great big beans that we like to have, those great big heavy beans that we like to have, and not just these BBs. When it turns hot and dry, you got to remember that plants drink nutrients, right? They don't eat them, they drink them. So you got to have that moisture to solubilize that potassium for the root system to be able to take it up, to be able to finish that crop off. Understanding this, if we know that we're dry, we've been dry, we're not drinking nutrients, there are things that we can do to still influence that crop and keep it trucking. That's late season potassium. Now, guys, I'll be honest with you, very opinionated when it comes to sources. I do believe that potassium acetate, by far, is the most superior form of foliar potassium that you can use. Texas A&M did a study several years ago, and they showed potassium carbonates, sulfates, thiosulfates, and on down the line, every form of foliar potassium. And by far, 4.5 times more efficient was potassium acetate versus any form of foliar potassium in the market, bar none. So if you're going to be making foliar potassium applications, potassium acetate's the source to use. Don't just stop there. Also look for products that have technology that actually support the function of potassium and what it's meant to do. When you think about late season, going source to sink, filling those pods out, making those bigger beans, I want to get it from that leaf tissue into that pod as quickly as I can. So think about technologies that support that. There are some seaweed compounds, seaweed extracts. There are some amino acids that work to support this function. Talk to your retailer, talk to your agronomist about these technologies that are out there that help support these, because you'll take and just completely change the dynamics of a foliar potassium acetate application and get so much more out of it. Back in 2020, I had a cooperator that worked with me on 500 acres. And based off of Dr. Castile's paper, we decided to change up our recommendations during reproduction and maturity. What we did is we switched from an R3 application of fungicide and insecticide and foliar potassium. We bumped that up to R2. So we did a fungicide, insecticide, we did foliar potassium, we ran a PGR package that had a combination of that kynotin, GABA, and choline chloride to be able to retain those fruiting sites and not allow Mother Nature to abort those pods. So from there, we went on and made a subsequent application at late R4.5 to R5 when those beans are fully potted and it's now just filling those pods out. We made another application and we put a sugar product that has multiple types of sugars, has technology to support the mobilization of nutrients inside of plants, and we made another potassium acetate with technology to support filling those pods out. And in that particular year, in 2020, we had 500 acres that went well over 60 pounds test weight. In many cases, we had 62-pound test weight. I'm not saying that's every single year you'll see something like that, but you will significantly change your yield and test weight if you switch that to a two-phase or two timings of application late season. These are just things that we're going to talk about and get more granular as we get into season when we talk from the field. And we have our agronomists from all over the country. So speaking of from all over the country, I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to send you to Jay Skillman down in Florida. So Jay, take it away.
All right, Gunny, thanks for that lead in. My name is Jay Skillman. I'm the sales agronomist for Florida. I cover Florida, Georgia, and Southeast Alabama. I drove down here today to Central Florida, but I've been up working in North Florida where they've been planting quite a bit of corn. We're through most of it up there, but up there, for talking about this establishment phase, I was using Grow Pack AI, which is one of our seed and type replacement products. It actually has a full miner's package. It has bradyrhizobium, trichoderma, and mycorrhiza fungi. So it's a great product. And Zach, if you could put that picture up while I'm talking, kind of show guys some results we've had early on in North Florida with that corn, that'd be great. But anyways, moving on, like I said, I drove down here today, and I'm at Bell Farms in Polk City, Florida. I'm today with Woody Reap. The primary product or primary crop for Bell Farms down here is strawberries. That's their primary deal. Sometimes they would do some secondary crops like squash, specialty pepper, and as you can see behind us, watermelons. This year was a tough year for the strawberry guys as a whole, as an industry, because as any of you remember, South Florida got hit by that hurricane earlier in the fall of 24. These guys were no different, suffered quite a bit of damage out here. Had a lot of plastic torn up. They had to relay, and already had a lot of plants that were destroyed too as well. So because of that, it makes it tough to get your plants, because you got to pre-order your plants. So you have to find stuff to do when you're short on plants to fill in the gap and utilize this plastic. This plastic is an expensive asset to lay down, so you don't want to lay fallow. So these guys actually put plants in here. And how old are these plants now, Woody?
About 5 to 6 weeks.
So 5 to 6 weeks old. They plant them, and you guys did from transplants, not seed, correct?
Yes, sir.
So we're talking about the establishment phase today. I mean, obviously you got to try to get these up and going. Woody, what product did you use to get these plants established?
We use Upward and Strongleaf.
So we said Upward and Strongleaf. I'm sure you guys are familiar with those products of ours. They're used quite a bit in the row crop world. They're either in furrow or in 2x2. But as you can see here, there's no in furrow or 2x2. So how did you put those products out here?
Use drip irrigation.
So those products can be used through the drip as they were used here. They have the same effect. They get out through the drip into under the bed, under the plastic. They actually get out to the crop and help. The 5-18-7 Strongleaf is our low index starter fertilizer. Like I said, it's a 5-18-7 analysis, but also has zinc and sulfur. The Upward is a product that has humic and fulvic acid. It also has our carbohydrate source, and also has our net technology that keeps your phosphorus in the plant available form. So it keeps more than 18% from the Strongleaf available to these plants. So like I said before, this can go out through the drip under plastic. Any specialty crop, whether it be tomatoes, peppers, watermelons, whatever you have, it can be applied through drip irrigation, just like going out in furrow in a row crop. But getting back to that, I mean, the row crops are definitely very easy to see the 5 phases. We've got our foundational establishments we're talking about today. Architecture, which is trying to grow that plant up, reproductive, and then maturation. Neat thing about these specialty crops is sometimes these crops will start, you'll be in multiple phases at the same time. So these guys, we're obviously through the establishment phase now. We're actually in part of the architectural phase. We're still trying to grow vines, fill in across these beds, and get good vine coverage across this whole area. But we're also in the reproduction. We've already got flowers out here. There's already some bloom with some watermelon up under those vines. And so they're trying to grow out. So we're kind of in the architectural, reproductive, and maturation phase all at the same time. So in doing so, what have you been using so far along in your foliar application to try to support those phases of this crop?
We've used Architect, Full-Cal, and then some Nutri-K.
All right. So again, you've already used Architect, which is our 10-5-5 with a full miners pack and GABA to try to get these things up and growing, grow these vines out, get them filled, and help mitigate some of the stress that they've been through. When he planted this crop, back when they set them 4 to 5, 6 weeks ago, had a lot of wind come through that time of year, just a lot of transitional type weather. And we were going through, what kind of wind did you guys have here, Woody?
About 20, 30 mile an hour winds.
So a lot of wind, and you guys can see here, again, I'm going to show you, this is some more of our fine Florida soil. I mean, it's I think if I remember Woody's sample, his CEC here was about a 3.5 to a 4. So not much organic matter, a lot of sand. So these plants are getting beat up and abused pretty roughly. So probably hard to see from that video, but if you can see, there's still some old damage from that wind burn that's on these plants. So try to get them out of that, and using that Full-Cal and Nutri-K to help, support the fruit production and the flowering, but also, help size and feed that potassium to this fruit. So trying to manage several phases of a crop along with this establishment phase that we're talking about today. But Woody, I just want to thank you for your time today.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for being with us in the field, and I'm going to pass it on to John so we can update from the field. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.
Hey, well, thanks, Jay. Definitely looks like you guys are a little further ahead of us down in Florida than we are up here in Missouri. But we're definitely on your heels, and we're all itching and ready to go. Want to take just a little bit and talk about some of the planning that the agronomy team has for this upcoming year. Specifically, 2 things that we think are going to be of great help to our dealers and our customers. The first is what we're going to call our educational plots. We're going to have 3 sets of plots scattered throughout mostly the central United States this year, where we're going to have an opportunity to really demonstrate what happens when we manage a crop from start in that foundation stage all the way through our architectural stage, the reproductive stage, and that maturity stage, just like Gunny's been telling us about, to show the ROI that we can have by managing it all the way through the growing season. And we thought, as we worked through that this winter, the best way to be able to do it would be able to have 3 of these plots that we can take our sales agronomists to, that we can really delve into collecting hard data from, and also use them as an educational tool where we can invite our dealers and our customers to those to demonstrate what do we need to be looking for, what is so important about the timing, and also to show them at the end of the season what happens when we manage it through each one of those stages. The nice thing is we're going to have them spread throughout the Midwest so that we can get to them in an easy day drive. We're going to have one up just north of Des Moines, Iowa, up by the Huxley area. That's going to be closest to our regional agronomist, Ben. And then we're going to have two over in the Illinois and Indiana region. We're going to have a full-fledged one just north of Indianapolis. And at this site near Rossville, Indiana, we're going to have a block of ground showing the impact of going from start to finish versus a grower standard practice, just so we understand why we need to manage each phase of our production. If we go south and west of there, down to the very southern tip of Illinois, we're going to have our third plot set up there, along with another dealer. And this is another opportunity for us to be able to bring real value to our customers in each one of those regions, because you're going to be able to come out, put your hands on this, be at one of our field days that we're going to host at each and every one of those sites, and also ask questions. Ask the questions of the people who have been applying each one of our different products. How easy was it to apply? What did it look like? What are some tips and tricks that we need to know there? But then we're also going to walk you through the agronomics of that at each and every stage. Whether you can be there in person and we're going to cook you a lunch, or we're going to be recording there throughout the entire growing season, you can start to understand what do you need to look for, because that's really where that value comes from. The true agronomics that are going to drive real world economics is understanding what are we doing in each and every phase. Why is it important that we fall in that V3 to V5? What's really happening at VT and R1 in corn? Why do we care about R2 and R3 in a soybean plant? We're going to have that opportunity to demonstrate to you hands-on what we're doing, because it all boils down to education. We want to educate ourselves because we don't know everything there is to know, but we also want to educate everyone else around us in the value that managing your crop is going to bring. Another way that we're going to be able to do this is also utilizing a fleet of multispectral drones. We're all familiar with NDVI. We can use climate data, and it's been a great tool for the industry. But the new imagery that we have now goes way beyond NDVI. And in fact, you're going to see us at these field days, but also our entire agronomy team has been fitted with these so that we can be in the field with you guys and show you real time what's happening with your crops and what do we need to be doing. And also the really neat part is what are our products going to be doing to bringing value. We're going to focus our imagery with our Mavic drones, which have an extra set of lenses outside of the reflectance that we see with NDVI. And we call it the red edge. And the great thing about the red edge is that it doesn't light saturate. With NDVI, once that canopy starts to close over, we start to saturate, or we just max out that index. I always say it's like that high school teacher that we had when we were going through, and if you showed up, you got an A, right? It's something, we're there, but it doesn't tell us a whole lot. When we get into the red edge, which the name is just like it sounds, just outside of what we're seeing, we see a change in the slope of reflectance and absorbance on the red edge based off of how much green leaf tissue you have and the rate of photosynthesis. Well, what's really driving our yield early in the season? It's going to be how much photosynthesis is happening in our crops. And we are working to develop ways to show that to you in real time. The second part of that, though, is we're going to be coming back through and we're making trips late season. Why are we doing it late season? Well, the second part of yield, when we think about developing it, is how long did grain fill duration last? Well, that's going to be determined by how long our plant keeps photosynthesizing, how long we can keep it alive to really max out our genetics. And we have developed ways to be able to show that to our customers. So we are really excited about the educational plots, but also the education that we're going to be able to bring to the field live for each and every one of you. In fact, my family has already booked trips going down through Arkansas, up through Kentucky, Tennessee, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then turning and reaching back up through Michigan, and then we're going to grab Wisconsin and Iowa on our first trip in June, just to be able to fly fields and do some education with that. And then for those of you that are up north, a week later, we're going to turn and we're going to head due north. And we're going to catch the other side of Iowa. We're going to catch Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, North Dakota, all the way over to Montana and even Arizona for some specialty crops. All with the idea that we're going to educate everyone around us what is actually happening. I like to use the keyword, drones don't lie. So when we put the drone in the air and then we analyze that data that's being collected with the drone, which will number in the hundreds of thousands of pictures a day, we'll analyze that for you, develop an entire crop report, and show you exactly what's happening in the crops. I'm so excited for what this growing season has coming, because we are going to change the face of education and the idea of agronomy all this year. And in fact, we're going to kick this up to Indiana, where Ed is at one of our research farms with one of our cooperative growers, and they're going to start to talk about how can we start to get our plants off on the best foot possible. So Ed, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Thank you, John. I am Ed Hopkins. I am coming to you from Indiana, actually in the heart of Purdue Boilermaker. I'm with Peyton Moeller, and as you can see, we're sitting behind this plant up here. And as we get ready to go to the field, Peyton, could you talk a little bit on your liquid system, like what you do in furrow and 2x2?
Yeah, so in furrow, we're running adrenaline from AgXplore. And the main reason we're running that product and kind of what we're seeing is we're trying to drive our seminal root system, which is our root system from the seed, and trying to get that as big as we can, and then transfer that to the nodal root system. That way we keep our relay effect going well from when we're changing from seed energy to root energy.
So looking at the establishment phase, what are you seeing like when you go out and dig roots as far as your plant overall health of the roots?
Yeah, we're seeing just an overall bigger root system, but what we really like is the root hairs. We're seeing a lot more root hairs, and we do feel like that is bringing more nutrients into our plant early.
Okay. So when we look at adrenaline, it basically has four components to it. So the technologies we have would be, we have a biostimulant to help with that big root mass and root hairs. And we got fulvic acid in there to help with nutrient absorption. We got a vitamin package that also helps with nutrient absorption. So I think that's probably a lot of the contribution that you're seeing, building that root mass when you go out and digging roots. So Peyton, now that we went over your in-furrow system, let's move over and talk about what you're doing on the 2x2.
Yeah. So we're using Precision Planning's furrow jets. So we're doing a little bit different than traditional 2x2. And with that, we are using a base of 1034O. We're adding upward and zinc, both from AgXplore. And really with that, we're trying to continue to drive root growth when we're thinking about the relay effect and the seed, switching from seed energy to root energy.
So Peyton, as far as the upward product, you're running that at 2 quarts per acre. And so when you're running that in your 2x2, it's got basically got 3 components to it. So it's got a humic acid, it's got a sugar source, and then it also has an enzyme package that the actual humic acid is actually a biochemically extracted product. So it's a clean and it's a very potent product to help with that root growth as well. Then when we look at the sugar source, at this stage, it's not a glucose base, it has 7 different types of sugars in it to help continue to build the sugar and the energy source for the plant. So on the enzyme package, it's just actually a source to help keep nutrients going to solubilize phosphorus along with other nutrients. So Peyton, been working with you several years. Could you talk a little bit about the handleability of the products, specifically the upward and adrenaline?
Yeah, dealing with humic products, you can have a lot of unclean products that cause a lot of trouble at planting time, and with the AgXplore products, we have not had that. They've been very clean, very easy to handle. We've had really great success with them.
All right, well, very good, Peyton. Thank you for your time today. Scott, I'm going to send it back to you to close this out.
Thank you, Ed. Hello everyone, this is Scott Hall reporting from Western Illinois, where the planters are getting ready to roll. I would like to thank you for joining us on this episode of From the Field. Today, Gunther and Dr. Murphy walked us through AgXplore's 5 phases of crop development, showing how aligning your practices with each stage can not only make a big difference in your field, but also in your wallet. We also took a closer look at upward and adrenaline and heard some great specialty crop insights from Jay Skillman. Now, please be sure to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel to make sure that you never miss an episode. And please mark your calendars for May 14th. Yes, that's May 14th, when we'll be back with Building a Plant Factory with Gunther Kreps, where we'll be digging into the science of how plants grow, what they need, and why it matters. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the field.